Hello chess enthusiasts, my name is Micha and welcome to my chessrealm YouTube channel. So another great game from the Chennai Chess Olympiad, from the 9th round duel between Paraguay and third team of India, playing Axel Bachmann as white and Surya Ganguly as black. I hope I have pronounced correctly. Anyway, Axel Bachmann started with knight to f3 and we have a Qc2 or Re8 opening, however you want to classify it. Black responds with d5, white plays e3. Knight goes to f6 and now c4 striking this pawn on d5. Black defends with e6, b2 preparing to fianchetto his dark square bishop, and black does the same, b6 preparing to fianchetto his light square bishop. So bishop goes to b2, bishop goes to b7, and now c pawn captures on d5, e pawn recaptures. Normal development moves were played so far and white continues with the development. Knight goes to c3. And of course, black wants to develop his knight, but doesn't want to get into the way of his bishop. So knight from b goes to d7, rook goes to c1. Once this knight is gone, let's say it goes to b5, we have double attack on this pawn on c7. So black plays a6, preventing this unpleasant knight to b5 jump. And now white continues with knight goes to e2, preparing to deploy it here on the king side. Black plays c5, and now indeed knight jumps on g3. And now very interesting move, black plays h5, threatening with the h4, trying to drive this knight from g3. Well, actually, it wouldn't have been anything wrong if white would allow this h4, but maybe white doesn't like this position, or maybe white wants to grab more material. So white plays h4, blocking this pawn on h5, and black plays g6, preparing to develop bishop to g7 so he can castle, and white responds with bishop goes to e2, but now black doesn't play bishop to g7. Very interesting. Bishop goes to d6. So black has weakened his pawn structure on the king side, but doesn't place bishop to b7. Maybe black was targeting this knight on g3, who is only protected by this pawn on f2, and maybe later somehow trying to undermine this pawn on f2. Anyway, in the game, white castles king side and black does the same. Now the pawn structure around the black king is weakened, so white has a slight edge, and knight takes a very dominant position and jumps in on g5, and now black knight jumps on e5. And yeah, now you can see black will definitely try knight to g4, targeting this pawn on f2, the only defender of knight on g3. But now white plays queen to c2, and now knight to g4 is not possible, because if knight, let's say, jumps here on g4, knight from g3 simply captures pawn on h5. If knight recaptures, we have bishop captures here on g4, gaining a pawn and in a much better position. If, however, h pawn, for example, should capture on h5, then we simply would have bishop captures on g4. Of course, if knight recaptures, queen to h7, checkmate in 1. If, however, h pawn recaptures, bishop captures on f6. And of course, if queen recaptures, queen goes to h7, it's checkmate. So actually, in this position, black would only play d4, and after d pawn captures, we have interference. Now h pawn can capture, but after the d pawn captures on c5, again this threat of capturing this knight on f6, the only defender of h7 square. Either way, black is lost in this position. So in the game, black plays bishop to c8, further reinforcing this g4 square, and white continues with f4, attacking knight on e5. Knight from e5 jumps here on g4. In this position, white had a very promising continuation. White should have played f5, targeting this pawn on g6, trying to demolish pawn structure around the king. But you might wonder, hey, what about this knight on g3? Well, let's see, bishop captures knight on g3, simply pawn captures on g6, threatening with capturing f7 with check. If f pawn would recapture on g6, then queen to g6, and after king to h8, queen to h7, it's checkmate, because knight on f6 is pinned. If, however, black will, let's say, try to capture pawn on h4, simply f pawn captures on f7. If king goes to g7, queen to h7, again checkmate. If, however, rook captures on f7, simply knight captures, king captures, and then of course queen to h7, evading the 7th rank. This knight is pinned, and again this is a definitely winning position for white, with black king in the open. Okay, so in the game, white doesn't find this f5 continuation. Instead, bishop to d3 was played, targeting this pawn on g6, black plays rook goes to a7, in case if white should capture, black would recapture, and rook to g7 defending the possible check. But at the time being, white is not interested in that. Rook to f3 was played. Now white wants to push this pawn to f5, but at the same time white wants to protect his knight on g3. Black continues with b5, and now white is sensing this c4 is coming, so queen goes to c1 in case if c4, then the bishop has escaped square here on h2. Black, however, doesn't play c4, rook to e8 was played, and now white is the first one who strike this pawn structure on the queen side. b4 was played. And black should have continued simply with c4, attacking this bishop. Bishop would go to c2, the game would be roughly equal, but here black makes first in the series of inaccuracies, c-pawn captures on b4. And this could have been a fatal blunder, and white should have continued with bishop to g6, targeting this f7 pawn, and after f-pawn would recapture, then rook would capture on c8, another sacrifice. Black would have no other option but to recapture with queen, and then first bishop would capture on f6, protecting this g7 square, preparing this queen to g6, and after a knight captures we have queen to g6, double attack on king and the knight. Well, this position is probably lost. King goes to f8, or let's say h8 is check, so black would probably play rook to g7, and then queen would capture knight on f6. So white would be a change now, but with a terrible attack, let's say knight to h5, attacking this rook would be fatal. Black would probably play bishop to e7, attacking the queen, queen to h6, even if bishop would capture, f-pawn would recapture, and this again is losing for black. Knight to h5 is a very serious threat. Rook to f8 doesn't help, simply knight goes to h5, threatening with checkmate here, even if rook goes to f7, queen to g6 check. When king goes to h8, this rook is double attack. This is just one of the possible continuations, but in all others black is lost. In the game, however, white doesn't find this continuation. Instead, bishop to d4 was played, attacking this rook on a7. Rook from a7 goes to e7, and now bishop captures knight on f6. Knight recaptures, and only now white plays f5. Now white wants to capture this pawn, at the same time attacking this knight. Black responds with bishop captures knight on g3, but white doesn't recapture and plays f-pawn captures on g6. Now let's see. White threatens with g-pawn capture on f7, forking both king and rook. Let's say if f-pawn captures on g6, we have rook captures here, knight on f6, threatening with check here on g6, even if, let's say, bishop to h4. Then white would play the rook to g6 check, even if black defends with rook to g7. Then first white would capture bishop on c8, and after queen recaptures, here we have rook captures on g7. After king recaptures, we have queen to b2, and this is losing for black. If king to h6 check, queen to f6 is checkmate. If higher, let's say king to f8, it's queen to f6 mate in the next move. King to g8, bishop to h7 checkmate. So here black could only sacrifice with queen, but then after pawn captures, white has a decisive advantage. So in the game, black plays bishop goes to e5, protecting this knight on f6. And now white continues with, of course, g-pawn captures on f7, forking king and the rook. So black has no other option but to capture with rook. And after knight captures, king captures. So what we have for a rook, black has two pieces, should be enough in a normal game, but this is not normal game. White continues with bishop goes to h7. Knight cannot capture because it's pinned by the rook, and white threatens with queen to g6, invading the black camp. So black plays bishop to g4, attacking rook on f3, and now we have intermediate move, queen to g6 check, king goes to e7, and now white doesn't remove this rook but plays d4, attacking bishop on e5. Well, let's see, if bishop captures rook immediately, we have d-pawn captures on e5, attacking this knight with the mating threats. Let's say even if knight goes, let's say, to d7, we have queen to g7 check, king to e6 the only option, after that rook to c6 is checkmate. So in the game, black first plays bishop captures pawn on d4, e-pawn recaptures, and only now bishop captures on f3. But white doesn't recapture immediately, instead queen to g7 was played. Now king can go to e6 or d6. Let's see if king goes to e6 after rook to c6. The only option for black is to sacrifice his queen on d6. So in the game black plays king goes to d6 and now queen to g3, attacking both king and bishop on f3. Of course white can regain material, but white is interested in mating attack, so king goes back to e7 and now rook to c7 would be the correct continuation, but white doesn't play immediately. White again plays queen to g7, repeating the moves. King goes back to d6 and now queen to g3 again, repeating the moves, trying to figure out the correct plan. And now after king goes to e7, white finally finds this rook to c7 check. Well, let's see, if king goes to e6, his queen to e5 is checkmate immediately. So in the game, black had no other options. If black doesn't want to lose queen on d7, to play knight to d7, and this is what happened. Knight goes to d7, and white responded with a very silent move. Rook goes to c, cutting off the 6th rank. Of course, if black plays a random move, let's say a5, queen to g7, checkmate. So in the game, black played bishop to g4, blocking this g file, but white simply played queen to d6 check. And let's see what black can do. The only free square for king is f7, so if king goes to f7, queen to g6 check. If king goes to e7, immediately queen to g7 checkmate. If king should go to f8, then queen to g8 check. After king to e7, queen to g7 checkmate. And realizing that all is lost, in this position Surya Ganguly resigned the game. So I hope you like this game, I hope you have learned something from it. If you have any questions, my email is below in the description. Of course, I invite you to visit my Instagram page. That's it for now, and see you soon.